Greetings, ladies and managers, and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Diary of a Prisoner of War, written by Farmwitch4275. The following are excerpts from the diary of Prisoner 118, Cato, of Clan Savani, Sergeant-at-Arms of the Imbakani Imperium during the 2 months of his incarceration at a prisoner of war facility 5 Lima. They've been abridged for the sake of brevity, and translated to standard as the Imbakani language is full of allegory and poetry rather than simple speech. Full transcripts are available in the Terran Archive and Wikimedia pages, as well as original copies available for purchase at any public library. Day 3. I managed to borrow a pen from one of the human guards after I found a blank book in my cell, so I decided to give a journal of my experiences. If I ever get out of here, it's only been 2 days since we started, and apparently most of us only just woke up. The only emotion that is permeating the unit is paranoia. Our accommodations are like nothing we expected. We expected to be piled up on top of one another like cheap foodstuffs, bossed to never sleep, or subjected to experimentation. No. 1 bed per cell, 1 cell per prisoner, and by all the ancestors, what a bed. I feel ashamed at this time to admit it or even consider it. I know not if it was the shock, the awe, or the exhaustion of battle. When my head hit that pillow, I was out cold. 2 days. I was told I was sleeping for 2 solid days. I looked at the bed, sat on it, and my resolve melted. So comfortable. Nothing like the bunk beds we had in our barracks. Did all humans sleep like this? What kind of trick were they playing on us? I was told by one of the guards, one of the so-called legionnaires, but another story to tell on that front, that we were asleep for so long they had to wake up one of our medics and make him perform examinations to see if we were okay. We were told to expect cruelty, torture. We were told to expect them to do to us worse than what we do to them. Looking back on it now, perhaps what the Grand Empire did to the colony was a bit excessive. We were told that we were going to face an enemy that offered no quarter. We were told that they would take us prisoner just so that they could hear us scream before they would get bored and toss us into the furnaces. Granted, despite the best efforts of our officers, we surrendered during that first battle. We watched from the skies as they turned our fleet of 27 ships into molten slag, a fleet that would, for the last 6 centuries, be considered invulnerable. The same fleet composition that would have given us countless victories and expanded our empire. They had a fleet of 200 ships. 200. Our fleet of 50 or more ships was considered an absurd decadence. Then we watched them land an army of 10,000. 10,000, in comparison to what we had, 600, at a large garrison. 600 was a large garrison. I was told by the same guard that the garrison of theirs was around 2,000 at minimum. Minimum. How many of these damn humans were there? They allowed us to keep our satchels full of food and supplies. I wonder why. I still have questions. There was no battle. We saw the numbers, saw how they turned our fleet into ashes in minutes. We wanted nothing to do with them. Then we saw those abominations, the legionnaires, monsters, demons, humans? Who really knows? It doesn't matter. We now know what kind of enemy we just provoked. We surrendered without a fight. Didn't even grace our data networks or cut communications. They probably know everything now. They picked us up, put us in these cells, and are transporting us home. Was this honorable? Probably not. But neither is death to an enemy we can't fight. But why treat us like this? Are they softening us up to make the torture worse? Are they going to starve us and watch us for fun? Nothing makes any sense. Comfy bed, peace, quiet. They aren't hurting us. Marconus next door started coughing up blood, hid an injury from our surrender when he got whacked by a wayward brick. They immediately dragged our medic out of his cell, then took him to the hospital. No laughter, no glee. They showed actual concern. What are they planning? Day 5. Finally got a chance to write again. The previous morning was one of incredible discoveries. Books. A group of guards suddenly flooded the cell block, armed, ready. This is it, we all thought. We were dragged out of our cells, and each one was systematically searched. Contraband check, they called it. By this point, the cell block guard and I had developed a certain rapport. He whispered that it was a weekly occurrence, checking us for anything of interest, removing things that could jeopardize safety. Theirs, or ours. They took nothing out, as 2 men searched every nook, cranny, and corner of the room. They then neatly put everything back where they found it, and carried it in a bag of some kind, a bag full of books. A bag full of 10 books was hauled out and then neatly stacked at the foot of the bed. Then they were put back in our cells, and quickly, as they came, they retreated, leaving us the load of the guards and our thoughts again. Marconus was back in his cell, and a new human was added to the guard roster. This one had a red cross on his armband. But the most shocking thing came barely a few minutes ago. Therantar, the only medicate in our unit that came with us, he was taken out of his cell hours ago and returned just now, wearing a Terran uniform, even bearing their flags now, and the Red Cross armband. I was not sure how to feel. Should I have felt happy or betrayed? But I have no words. 4 ration blocks left. Day 6. Therantar came in to give me a checkup this morning, something the humans called for, to check the health and sanity of all the prisoners. I asked him why he was wearing a Terran uniform. He said nothing. He just smiled at me and continued to work. When he was done, I noticed he was now carrying a pistol, a human pistol, on his waist belt. He was one of them now. I don't know how to respond to this, but apparently it was just easier to give him a job. 2 ration blocks left. After this, we fear them poisoning us, probably like they did to the Therantar. How else would he have shifted his loyalties so quickly? There must have been something in the food they gave him. Must be. How can anyone shift their loyalties so easily, so quickly? Must be poisoned or drugged or something. Are they running experiments on us? Must be. No way a man can shift his loyalty so quickly, especially not him. He was like the sergeants. For the Empire, he would say, while stitching limbs back onto soldiers. Must be drugging us or something. Must be. I was told that we would be reaching Planet 4 within the next few days. Transfer from a prison ship to an actual prison camp. Maybe that's it. He knew that we were getting close to the real experience, the real thing. What the humans were actually planning to do, from the confines of the starship brig to the confines of, probably, shackles, laboratories, and other things. I shuddered, thinking of what would happen. They must be softening us up to make us easier to something. I don't know anymore. What are they planning? What do they have in mind? This was not the behavior of a mindless barbarian. It was the behavior of a cold, calculating monster. What were they planning? Day 7. Ration block gone. None left. Made landfall today. We were taken out of our cells and put in chairs bolted to the floor with things called seat belts. We were then led out of the ship after we landed, and as soon as we were out, we noticed how advanced the humans were compared to us. Their prison ships we brought in was a cruiser. They had the tech to bring capital ships into planet's gravity wells. They actually could do that. Why was this place so open? Where were the fences? Where were the quarantine posts? Where was anything? No chains, no shackles, not even rope. We simply marched through the streets to a facility near a military-based location. Chain-link fences, razor wire. Sounded normal for a prison, but why did I see grass when I looked into the yard? Why did I see smiling guards? We were under heavy guard, of course, but to walk down the street with people watching, why were they smiling at us, waving at us? Nobody said or did anything for the time we were on the march. Marconus didn't come with us. He was transferred to a hospital nearby instead of a prison camp. We thought that we would never see him again. One of his forelegs had turned green. Seems the damage he'd gotten from the brick was worse than we thought. The prison camp wasn't, as guarded as we thought it was. But the mere presence of the Centurions, the lesser but still dangerous variant of the Legionnaires, made us wary and terrified. As soon as we entered the facility, we noticed just how strange it was. This was not a city, but a small rural town in the sticks of a farming world. We wondered why. We were fingerprinted, issued uniforms marked with PW on the back lettering, and subjected once again to health inspections. Barracks made of wood and metal, built in like houses around us rather than prison camps. For those of us that braced for brutality, the sight of children playing at the edge of the camp's fence was more than just a little jarring. The barracks building housed 50 of us in each building, not quite as decadent as the individual cells we were given on the ship, but spacious, open. Bunk beds and beddings made especially for us, not hastily constructed but rather purpose-built. Mixed-species bedding was understandably difficult to manage, as a few of us required special conditions outside of suits. So we were separated by species in some cases and made to sleep in specialized bunks. For most of us, the simple rectangular bed that humans used was enough, either made slightly longer or slightly shorter, depending on the occupant. The bedding and accommodation was just as comfortable as those on the ship. They asked us what kinds of qualifications or skills we had, making note of who were mechanics, cooks, anything they could find. If one had a skill, they could make use of it. Use of it. So that was their plan. They needed labor forces. Suddenly, this made sense. They were going to use us to fuel their war machine against us. Made sense. Was the battle just a fluke, just an accident that they got the upper hand? Were they, in fact, in dire straits? They needed prisoner labor to cover the shortfall. The thought made some of us hope that one day they would see the Imperial fleet in the skies above us, ready to release a glorious retribution. Some of us, though, weren't so easily swayed. In my case, I was a carpenter by trade before I was conscripted. During my time in service, I made cargo crates that would hold provisions and ammunition for my division. The human guards nodded, made a note or two, then sent us to our bunks for the day. But something gnawed at us. We needed food. With the last ration block gone, it was nearing the end of the day when we needed to eat. I spotted Tarantar later that day, now wearing a different uniform, white doctor scrubs with a Red Cross symbol. I saw the writing on the back of his jacket, Medicina Sans Frontieras. Don't know what that means, but the fact that he was here, and now actively working for the humans in the infirmary, it didn't hurt as much as it should have. As much as I was told it should have anyway. Finally, the time came. The hunger began to hit us. All of us, at least who could see, were asked if it was our dinner time, our meal time as we know. We all shook our heads and waved our humans off and spent the first night tossing, turning, and pretending to rest as we feared what they would do to us. Day 8. I feel sick. Morning came and was barely slept. The hunger was worsening. We began bargaining for access to the last food ration cube that one of the sergeants hid for just in case. We didn't have very much to bargain with, but we did anyway. We were interrupted by the Centurion banging on the camp door, and we were made to stand for inspection. 3 officers in Tarantar, still wearing that uniform, searched our beds for contraband and gave us a medical check again. When we were effectively cleared, we were barked at and told to proceed to the canteen for breakfast. The sight that greeted us in the canteen was overwhelming. I still have stomach cramps from it. Tarantar gave his diagnosis as acute dietary toxic shock, describing the symptoms as the fact that we spent the last 5 years eating nutrient-rich ration bars meant that human food, even if it was prepared specially towards our species-specific dietary needs, was too decadent for us to handle. Our meals consisted of real meat, actual meat, the first I had had in years, stacked high in boxes that we could simply reach for and take. We were confused, scared. What was going on? I had no time to think. I was simply hurried forward by the Centurions on duty. Make a choice, eat whatever you want, carnivore or herbivore. Just make it quick. We don't have all day, they said. In my case, a scoop of mashed potatoes, a fried chicken breast, and a side of greens included something called lettuce and carrot, leafy greens, and strangely sweet orange cubes. The taste was like nothing we had ever experienced. An empire of 1,000 worlds, and food was not something we really considered. Nutrient cubes made from farm products were the norm. A combination of logistics and education told us we don't need to taste, we just need to eat. Meaning we had no real concept of culinary arts or such things. To us, food was just food, fuel for the body, fuel for the empire. That first taste broke me. It sent my body into a wild fever dream of deliciousness. The crispness of the skin, the softness and tenderness of the meat inside. If I didn't feel sick after that, I would have probably started to cry. I now lay in my bunk. I faded light, allowing me to write. A bucket to my left, with the Centurion in the meditative stance standing at the door. A hotline to the infirmary at his belt, waiting for the next one of us to go into toxic shock. The implication that the food was poisoned or laced with chemicals claimed at least half of us, with those few too paranoid to eat anything pushing their trays aside and pretending to ignore the smells of the food that permeated the air. This didn't last long as the Centurions, the humans' precious military police units, came up to our trays and ate from them. The Centurion on duty, the one called Lanius, walked up to me, and I demanded answers, yelling at the humans that they were poisoning us. I was feeling sick after the first few bites. He shrugged, picked up my half-eaten chicken breast, and bit into it himself. He shrugged, glaring at me. Seems fine. No poison here, is there? He said, and finished off the meat, glaring at me. He shrugged again, heading over to the canteen, and grabbed another piece, put it on a small plate, and put it on my plate. It made us sick. He didn't even flinch. Anyone who's feeling sick, it's all in your head. Visit the infirmary if you need to, he commanded, and returned to his watch. This basically dispelled the rumors that they were poisoning us or maybe adding chemicals. Centurions were a precious resource for humans. We had seen reels of spy footage showing how ordinary humans would sacrifice themselves to save one of them. Now here was one of their precious officers casually chowing down on a piece of meat we believed to be toxic. That hit something. We were told the food was too much for us to handle. They would be giving us some recovered rations from our previous post they found until they could tone down the food a bit to allow us to adjust. Water, at least, didn't seem to hurt us, but it was fresh, clean, everywhere. Even the water that came from taps was cleaner and seemed fresher than any we had ever tasted. Even the water was decadent. The water was so clean and pure that we considered it a luxury. The absurdity of it all. We had water. But why, looking back, did it feel so, dirty? Day 9. Food cube rations were handed over to us this morning, along with a side of fresh chicken meat with no spices or additives this time, just cooked, bland, tasteless. A strange, seemingly boring meat, but it was meat. The first meat most of us had tasted since leaving childhood. At least we had stopped vomiting and were getting real food now. The humans explicitly told us to get used to the food as quickly as possible, as there was a very limited supply of food cubes. The Empire was now starting to destroy its own supply lines. This means that they were losing. It means that we were losing. Destroying supplies and equipment after battle was a telltale sign the Empire had no hope of recapturing an area, and made sure to leave nothing behind during their retreat. A common tactic, but probably not one we used in the numbers I'm thinking about. I saw those ships in the skies. I saw the battle. I saw the numbers humans had. I saw the capital ship they could bring into a planet's surface. I ate the food. I started to think attacking humans was a bad idea. The humans finally put us to work today, or at least told us what was going to happen. It made me strangely happy to hear that they were now on a full war footing and that farming and other industries were in short supply in terms of manpower in the general area, thanks to thousands of men signing up for service in response to our declaration of war. Consequently, some industries were a bit undermanned. This made me happy. Maybe they weren't quite as impressive as I thought they were. Maybe just one cruiser was all they had. But why use a ship where you can drop an entire army onto a planet as a prison ship? So many questions, so many theories. Time will tell, I suppose. Day 12. We were herded out of our bunks for a daily inspection this morning. During this inspection, Centurion Lanius spoke to us and explained a system that we were about to engage in. Voluntary work. I remembered most of the speech. Today begins our voluntary work program. Remember, voluntary. You don't have to if you don't want to. You will in fact be paid for your work. What happens during your work, well, that's up to you. You'll of course be under guard, and any escaped attempt, well, you know what'll happen. Besides which, for those who didn't know, here's a little factoid. Did you know humans have this thing called the right to bear arms? It means that every human you see outside of the defensive line is just as, if not more heavily armed than the soldiers you see guarding this camp. So keep that in mind, he said with a chuckle, a strangely sadistic smile creeping across his face. All of us shared terrified glances. I remembered those faces that effectively said, what in the actual hell? The expressions that effectively told each other whatever escape plans we had were instantly evaporated. Regardless, this is how the system works. You'll be taken under escort to various industries outside the camp, and you'll do the job you think you like. You'll be paid in 2 ways. The first being camp script. This script will be used here at the camp to purchase luxuries such as sweets, books, or treats, or whatever kind you can handle. The second being system credit. You'll be paid standard wages by the hour at the job you work in. The money will be deposited into a bank account in your name. When you are out, one way or the other, this money will be yours. You can spend it in whatever way you wish, with fast-track recommendations to get you into a job of your choosing, or carry on as you were when all of this nonsense was over, he said. I raised my claw. We are prisoners. Why are we being paid? Because unlike your wretched masters, we as a species believe the concept of slavery is an unforgivable crime against nature. We suffered the crime that is this practice long before we met any of you. The Ottomans, the transatlantic, the corporate wars, the pre-globalization. We know what it feels like to be a slave, and we expended billions of lives getting rid of it. Prisoner or not, if you work, you will be compensated. But unlike your emperor, we believe in fair trade. He slowly approached me in line, staring me right in the eye as he slowly closed the gap between us. I nodded and nervously chatted. Now that we understand each other, make sure that you know that you are under full surveillance. There is no escape. But then again, there isn't really an incentive now, is there? It's not like you have anywhere else to go. I shall repeat myself. This work is voluntary. If you just want to read books, by all means, go ahead. I shall simply encourage you to seek reasonable employment. You can either choose a new profession to try or go with what you know. It's all up to you. First bus leaves in 2 hours. Talk to the quartermaster in the bright red building there to seek a job out. Think it over, will you? He calmly explained, then walked away. I thought about it for a while. I didn't think that it was worth it, but I decided to see what luxuries these humans had on offer. I may not be a slave in the traditional sense, but I'm sure as hell am a slave to this thing called chocolate. The shopkeeper responsible for the small tuck shop, as they called it, gave me a small piece of something called a Kit Kat for free after it caught my eye. I took it behind the bunkhouse, and by the Emperor's unholy Kulgroth, was it the single most delicious thing that I'd ever tasted in my damned life. I must have more. I guess that's why I found myself signing up for a job as a woodworker in a sawmill nearby. I wonder what the humans do for woodwork anyway. Day 16. Furniture. It turns out to be a store that crafts specialty furniture, luxury furniture, tables, chairs, bed frames, sometimes wood flooring. But the wood that is used is the strangest but most beautiful kind I've ever seen. The sawmill stores wood logs in lakes. I didn't understand the concept of it. It was the oddest thing ever. Then I saw the result. A table made from a fresh log versus one of these water-aged logs. The color was vibrant, beautiful, deep. I asked how because I now knew why. Apparently these 100-year aged logs, 50 years, half a century. This absolutely terrified me. Firstly, the planning. They can plan ahead, decades, in advance. They can set aside vast areas of land to secure this planning, then think ahead for that far. The sheer logistics behind this operation made my brain cease functioning for a while. I almost missed the training they had me go through for my actual job. Now, they had the resources to do this in the first place. They had to cut down thousands of trees. I asked about this, and was told they planted forests specifically for use years down the line just for this task. This made me terrified. What kinds of strategies or tactics could they possibly be capable of? How far ahead in a battle could they think? And more importantly, the level of patience they had to have to make this business work. Incredible. Humans didn't live long compared to most species in the galaxy. How could they even do this? To make plans for something you won't live long enough to actually profit from. It was about the time I finished my first table that I lost all hope for the Empire. Humans had their numbers, their planning, tactics. We had no hope of victory. Maybe we had the chance at a stalemate or perhaps a peace treaty. Who really knew at this point? My fears were confirmed shortly after this, when that ship appeared again, shortly before we were made to turn in for the night. A new group of prisoners were walked into the camp. Among them was one of our admirals, mine, to be precise, Admiral Takat Saham of Clan Yumei, one of the best in our fleet. And the humans captured him. As I write this, he's in the main area receiving orientation and medical checks. I don't know what to think. Day 19. Admiral Takat told me what happened. He moved a fleet of 200 ships into formation in orbit of the Great Sun, the first major colony our empire ever built. 200 ships. A fleet never heard of in our history. We never needed that much firepower. I remember his words. We were ready. It looked like there was nothing that could stop us. A dozen dreadnoughts, my flagship, and every ship I could spare from the national fleet. We had 200 ships. I had every guardsman I could muster, and every garrison in the area. I pulled back all our resources and pulled them in one place to see if we could try holding one place, he said with a tear in his eye. 200 ships, the largest fleet we have ever assembled. They warped in with a fleet of 3,000, including 60 warships that we would consider impossible in size. Titan-class ships, 3,000. I was later told that it wasn't the largest that they had ever assembled. The largest they had ever had was a cohort of 10 separate fleets, a total of 20,000 ships. 20,000. He held his head in his hands and wept. What was I supposed to do except surrender to that 3,000 ships? An army of over 1 million men. By numbers alone, we would have lost. A few ships went down fighting, refusing surrender. They either were vaporized or they fled. I can't blame them. How were we supposed to fight something like that? He started to bawl like a child, denied his mother's embrace. and was incoherent for the remainder of that day. The homeworld was close. It wouldn't be long now. The last ships we had, everything we had, would be brought to bear to defend the homeworld. We just lost 200 ships. At this point, there was no point fighting. Day 21. Admiral Ducat has calmed down, and I've gotten into a rhythm at my job. I wouldn't say my job was relaxing, but at least it was something to do, and I'd rather enjoyed it despite the circumstances. Random visits by the Centurions, and even with the constant threat of their citizenry and soldiers, making tables and chairs was calming. I spent every damn credit I made on chocolate. I have been to the infirmary following my excessive consumption of sweet substances. I've been lectured not only by several Centurions, but also by Thorental and the human medicate on duty about it. I decided instead to buy a book this time with my script, and a smaller Kit Kat bar. More manageable, I suppose. I won't get yelled at by the doctors. The newcomers have also settled into calmness I've never thought possible. Centurion Lanius had once again demonstrated that food wasn't poisoned after a few of the newcomers indulged a bit too heavily. That's it, everyone's straight. I've settled as well. I have a new friend, Jerry, who works with me at the furniture factory. He shared lunch with me once. Nice guy. Day 30. Been a while since I had the strength to stay awake long enough to write anything in this thing. We have been at war with the humans for 6 months now, and I know for a fact that we are losing. More and more prisoners were being led in, new faces, but all with the same expression: shock, awe, defeat. I had my first encounter with a legate today during daily inspection, terrifying creatures that are more vicious than their legionnaires, and taller than their centurions by a clear foot. I had to explain to this legate why my bedside table looked like brand new and fancier than all the others. I told him the truth. I made it in my spare time at the furniture factory with spare parts and cobbled together from several types of wood. Then I was allowed to keep it. He gently picked it up and inspected it closely. He commented on how I was able to actually mix the wood grains and wood types into a nice pattern. He told me that it was a really good solid piece of work, and asked if I perhaps do commissions. I told him I'd have to ask the company I now work for. He nodded and said something to Centurion Lanius as he walked out. It seems I have a future in this industry after all. Day 38. Today I went to the store to buy chocolate and a new book. I had almost worn the pages of the copy of Napoleon's memoirs. I needed something new to read, and chocolate. I needed chocolate. I asked the clerk on duty if there was any way that I could check my account. I wanted to know what kind of earnings this job was actually getting me. He agreed and said it was okay to check. They were my wages, after all. I had earned, not only through my own work, but through the various commissions for my tables and chairs I've been putting together on the side, over $2,000 worth of wages. Apparently, $2,000 a month is enough to save up for a house or even land to build one on. I was told, technically, I was being paid the minimum for my work, in accordance with labor laws. I went to the mill for work later and was told that if this ever ends and I decide to do this job professionally, I would be able to earn up to $6,000 a month with just the work at the factory, not including the side job I was now doing. This was a new kind of revelation, one that cemented we weren't able to fight against them. We were going to lose the war. They had a very robust economy and one that was well managed. Apparently, a very different state of affairs today compared to what the world was a century before humanity took to the stars. Our own citizenry earned the equivalent of a medieval peasant's wages despite the fact that we built starships and terraformed planets. Most of what we earned went to the Emperor and his cohorts for projects and expansion. Most of our food production went to the military to feed our soldiers. We simply wrote it off as the cost of an empire. These humans very clearly had other ideas. Still, I have hope that we'd push them back, that there would be a turn in the tide. I still have hope. Day 47. Admiral Ducat, as it turned out, was a decent mechanic before he was conscripted, and found himself a job tending the massive quantities of advanced farming equipment that we have here. I made him a special lunch chair that he could use to sit down and enjoy his lunch. I guess I shouldn't call him an admiral anymore. Mechanic Ducat seems undignified somehow. Today, he was called in to repair some machinery, specifically the crane we used and helped some of the other mechanics get it working again. Lunchtime arrived. Before spending time here, we considered a midday meal to be an unnecessary decadence. Now, though, we understood why. Humans worked unbelievably hard for a species once believed so weak, harder than most of us had to. And they did this despite the fact that they wouldn't live long enough to see most of that work complete or used. It made us question a lot of what we had been taught. We sat quiet at lunch, having already eaten our meal ration. He smiled. "It's good to be home." I didn't respond beyond a sigh and waited for the sun to dip just below the ridge of an old church steeple. They won. They treated us with kindness. Bad behavior wasn't punished with violence, but with patience. They ate the same food they served and drank the same water, even in some cases slept in the same bunks when something went wrong. They defended us from the actions of perturbed, rightly so, passers-by when we came here. They treated us not as enemies, but rather as friends. They won. Day 52. The Empire finally responded. A live broadcast was sent through every channel and network in the early morning hours. The Emperor himself had led a deep strike mission into the heart of human territory and were broadcasting the attack. They found their way to the human homeworld by sneaking in through unchecked void lanes and had the fleet assembled in force. 600 Imperial warships. He began a grand speech as the fleet approached Earth. It was short-lived, as within seconds the human opened fire and wiped half the fleet out. We saw in crystal clear view as the Earth fleet, a fleet of 100 battleships and dreadnoughts, used one precision strike to obliterate the Emperor's flagship. He didn't survive the blast. With leadership gone, the fleet went into disarray and were wiped out in short order. The Emperor was dead. Killed by hubris, apparently. Lanius laughed at the speech shortly before the Emperor's flagship was bombarded into oblivion. I asked him why. "Your Emperor is an idiot. He focuses on spectacle rather than substance, which is why he's announcing his intent to assault the whole world. He has a distinct advantage, one that would have cost us dearly in the end and possibly would have made us lose soul, at least for now. But the idiot's so high on his ego, he couldn't help himself, and effectively broadcast his surprise attack to the galaxy, costing him any advantage he had. Thus far from the intel reports, the only part of your leadership cast that we've encountered thus far with even the most basic of common sense has been Admiral the Cut. I don't really want to sound condescending or mean here. I mean, this is embarrassing, but holy Christ in a canoe, this is bad. I question if you guys surrendered because you didn't want to deal with the incompetence, or if you surrendered because you actually knew something we didn't. If any of our leaders acted like this guy, they would have faced a firing squad. Absurdity. Pure absurdity." Lanius simply shook his head in disgust as the Emperor's flagship was obliterated. "Those poor men. It really pains me to see so many dying for no real reason other than supposed honor of obeying the orders of a man who should have no right to sweep a broom, let alone lead a nation. At least I can say for certainty that judging by the faces in this camp, that at least some of you have had the common sense enough to see the idiocy of it all and decide incarceration rather than adding another number to an already pointless death toll. Such a waste of life." He shook his head and returned to his office to start writing out reports, or whatever it was he was doing. I didn't really have words. I didn't surrender because I saw the flaws in leadership. I surrendered because I didn't want to fight something I couldn't win. Day 60. It's over. The attack on Earth galvanized the Terran Federation, and they sent an all-out assault on the Empire. It took them 8 days to effectively wipe out the Throne World's defense fleet. Within hours of landfall on the planet's surface, the entire Admiralty Board had either been executed, surrendered, or in 2 particular cases, outright defected. It was over. The Terrans are celebrating. Some of us are too, but not for the same reason. Lanius's words cut us deeply that day, and some of us weren't sure what to think anymore. But now the war was over. We aren't prisoners of war anymore. I wonder what happens now. End of diary. According to the judicial records, Cato of the clan Savani was repatriated to his homeworld of Cassius Prime, where he used his accumulated funds to purchase land and a house. His prisoner uniform and diary can now be found at the museum in the surviving historical area of the detention facility camp, now in service as a hotspot for the Scouts and other youth organizations. Cato himself appears to be employed at his own company, making custom wood crafts for locals. The Imicani Imperium was officially dissolved and merged into the Terran Federation 6 months after the capture of the Throne World. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.